You made it, someone said loudly, before I even closed the door. I didn't think you could afford the gas. Laughter followed. Easy. Practiced. I was still standing on the threshold of my childhood home in Maple Ridge, Colorado, snow melting into the worn seams of my coat. The zipper on my fake leather bag gaped open, the teeth uneven where it had broken years ago. I kept it that way. It matched the story they told themselves about me. Inside, the house was full. Cinnamon in the air, meat sizzling somewhere unseen, red wine breathing in wide crystal glasses. This was not a family dinner. It was a celebration. Avery Whitmore, my older sister, had just been appointed CEO. $500,000 a year. Stock options whispered about like blessings. I knew something no one else in that room did. No one here knew that I owned a private technology company valued at $1.2 billion. No one knew about Orion Nexus Group, the layered holding structures, the trust written in language so clean it sounded harmless. I had built it quietly, on purpose. I stepped inside anyway, dressed exactly as they expected. I hadn't come to be congratulated. I hadn't even come to be tolerated. I came to watch who they became when they believed I had nothing left to lose. My mother, Elaine Whitmore, opened the door fully and offered a polite smile that never reached her eyes. No hug, no warmth. Her gaze dropped, coat, bag, shoes, then lifted again, already done with me. "Dinner's inside," she said, as if speaking to a delivery driver. The room adjusted to my presence by subtracting me. Conversations thinned. Smiles recalibrated. Music seemed to lower itself, without instruction. Avery glanced over from near the fireplace, champagne flute balanced loosely in her fingers. She smiled, slow and amused. "Wow," she said. "You really committed to the look. Still pretending this is temporary?" Someone added, "At least she's consistent." I said nothing. I set my bag down by the wall. No one offered to take my coat. That was the role I was here to play. The failure. The invisible one. The family's quiet, cautionary tale. And I played it well. Because silence is useful when you're collecting information. When you're confirming suspicions. When you're deciding who deserves to be protected and who doesn't. Stay with me until the end. They called me the family disappointment, but what I quietly built for myself will make that label collapse under its own weight. The silence around me didn't last. It never does. Contempt prefers sound. My father, Gerald Whitmore, was the first to break it. He leaned back in his chair, glass in hand, eyes half-lidded in the way he used to when he thought he was being generous. "So," he said, loud enough for the table, "did you have to beg for time off again? Must be hard getting a Christmas shift covered at a local bookstore." A few people smiled. Not cruelly. Comfortably. I nodded once. "It took some rearranging," I said, "but I managed." That answer pleased him. It confirmed the version of me he needed to exist. Aunt Marjorie slid into the empty space beside me as if on instinct, her concern already prepared. "You're still living alone, right?" she asked. "That little apartment?" She lowered her voice theatrically. "Retail can be so unstable at your age. Have you thought about something more permanent?" I looked down at my hands, folded neatly in my lap. "I'm grateful to have steady work," I said. And I meant the sentence, even if they misunderstood what it referred to. Across the table, Uncle Franklin let out a short laugh. "Steady," he repeated. "That word always scared me." He took a sip of wine. When I was 32, I was already running my own financial consulting firm. Long hours, sure, but that's ambition. He didn't ask what I did. He didn't need to. The assumption was enough. My cousin Paige leaned in next, wrist deliberately angled so the light caught her jewelry. "I just closed on my third property," she said, to no one in particular. "It's all about timing the market." She smiled at Avery. "You get it." Avery did. She always did. Someone refilled her glass. Someone else asked about her bonus structure. 500,000 a year was repeated like a refrain, half admiration, half warning. This is what success looks like. This is what you are not. I noticed how conversations curved away from me, how people stood, then shifted, as if proximity carried risk. They spoke around me, over me, past me. I had become furniture, present, functional, ignorable. I accepted the role without protest, because playing small has advantages. People reveal themselves when they don't feel watched, when they think the person in front of them can't do anything with what they hear. I listened. I noted who boasted, who exaggerated, who avoided specifics, who kept glancing toward Avery before speaking, waiting for alignment. This wasn't humiliation. It was reconnaissance. They mistook my quiet for defeat, my gratitude for resignation. My job, my apartment, my coat, they thought these were the sum of me. They didn't see the documents indexed by date, the emails archived, the contracts mirrored and notarized, my paper insurance, assembled slowly, patiently, without drama. I let them underestimate me, because underestimation is a kind of anesthesia. It dulls caution. And as the night deepened, I realized something with absolute certainty. No one here was interested in who I actually was, which meant no one would see what was coming. The room rearranged itself the moment Avery stood. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Chairs shifted. Glasses were set down more carefully. She had learned early on how to command attention without asking for it. The charcoal gray suit she wore fit like it had been negotiated. Clean lines, soft structure, authority without apology. On her left hand, the diamond engagement ring caught the chandelier light and scattered it across the ceiling. Avery smiled and let the silence finish its work. She began talking about the board, about strategic realignments, about workforce optimization and global expansion, words that floated easily in her mouth, practiced until they sounded inevitable. She spoke of decisions that affected hundreds of employees, as if they were chess pieces that moved themselves once she pointed. People leaned in, nodded, asked questions that were really compliments. I stayed where I was, near the edge of the room, watching the performance from a distance that felt intentional. Halfway through her monologue, Avery's eyes landed on me. For a fraction of a second, something tightened. Surprise, sharpened by annoyance. "Oh," she said lightly. "Lena's here." A ripple of attention followed her gaze, brief and reluctant. She smiled at me then, small, precise. A smile that didn't invite response. "I didn't realize you'd be free tonight." "I had the evening," I said. She accepted that, the way you accept weather. "I'm actually looking at houses in Hillcrest Heights," she continued, turning back to the group but keeping me in her periphery. "Close to the new offices. It just makes sense to invest where you're building." Her fiancé, Ethan Cole, stepped in smoothly. He was tall, confident in the way men get when success comes by proximity. "We've toured a few places already," he said. 4,000 square feet, minimum. You need room to breathe." Someone whistled softly. Someone else laughed, impressed. At the far end of the room, my grandmother, Margaret Whitmore, cleared her throat. The sound cut sharper than she intended. She looked directly at me. "You know," she said, voice tight with disappointment, "you used to win National Science Awards. We all thought you were going somewhere." The room stilled again. This time, the silence was expectant. I met her eyes. "I did go somewhere," I said, "just not where anyone predicted." That answer unsettled her. It wasn't defensive enough. Avery tilted her head. Life takes strange turns, she said, as if translating for me. Not everyone is built for pressure. I nodded once. That's true. I could feel the weight of their conclusions settle. This was the narrative they preferred. Potential squandered, ambition misplaced, talent wasted quietly so it didn't challenge the order of things. They didn't see the irony that the language Avery used, optimization, alignment, growth, was borrowed from frameworks I had written myself years earlier, that some of the strategies she praised so fluently had been tested first inside Orion Nexus, before her board ever put them on a slide. I watched Ethan glance at Avery for cues, watched my grandmother look away, already finished with me, watched the room return to its orbit around the golden center. I kept my posture small, my tone neutral. I let the image hold, because this was the moment where belief hardened, where they finalized who I was in their minds. And once that happened, nothing I did afterward would be interpreted as ambition, only as consequence. While Avery continued describing the new office, floor-to-ceiling glass, panoramic views of Denver, sunlight engineered into productivity, I noticed the staff. The caterers moved quietly along the walls, refilling glasses before they were empty, collecting plates before anyone asked. No one said thank you. No one met their eyes. They were treated the same way I was. Functional, replaceable, barely present. My mother drifted toward a cluster of her friends, her hand gesturing vaguely in my direction. Lena works at a bookstore, she said, smiling. It keeps her busy. Busy. Not fulfilled. Not accomplished. Just occupied. Like a hobby that had gone on too long. I stepped away before I could be invited into the conversation as evidence. In the kitchen, I paused by the counter, pretending to read a holiday card. That's when I heard my parents' voices, lowered, urgent, familiar. She's fallen so far behind, my father said. It's embarrassing. Elaine sighed. We tried being patient, but look at Avery. Look at where she is. We can't let Lena keep drifting, he replied. It's not healthy. They spoke as if I weren't standing 6 feet away, as if I were an abstract problem, not a person. She needs a wake-up call, my mother said. We've prepared everything. Paper slid across the counter. I caught a glimpse, folders, crisp, labeled. This is an intervention, my father continued. She just doesn't know it yet. Elaine's voice hardened. I won't let her waste her life in mediocrity. Not anymore. I didn't move. I didn't breathe too loudly. They had coordinated this. Talking points, job listings printed and highlighted, a plan to realign me with the family narrative, compliance dressed up as concern. I returned to the living room as Avery finished her story, applause following automatically. My parents exchanged a look, confirmation, not relief. Elaine approached me, her smile warm enough to be mistaken for kindness. Sweetheart, she said, touching my arm lightly. We want to talk to you later, as a family. I nodded. Of course. She didn't notice how carefully I said it. I watched as relatives subtly repositioned themselves, forming a loose semicircle. Not accidental. This was staging. They had assigned roles, supportive concern, tough love, objective advice. Someone handed me a glass of water instead of wine. They weren't celebrating Christmas. They were preparing a correction. That's when it became clear. This wasn't about helping me succeed. It was about restoring balance, about ensuring that Avery's ascent remained unchallenged, that the family hierarchy stayed intact. They needed me small, so she could stay large. I thought of the documents waiting elsewhere, indexed, notarized, time-stamped. Years of paper insurance built quietly while they were busy rehearsing speeches. They believed I was unprepared, that I needed guidance. What they didn't understand was that this entire evening, the condescension, the whispers, the manufactured concern, was evidence, pattern, motive, intent. I looked around the room one last time before the intervention began, at the smiles that didn't reach eyes, at the confidence that comes from believing someone can't fight back. This wasn't Christmas. It was a coordinated attempt to erase what they thought had already failed, and they had no idea how much they were about to give me. The gift exchange began the way all rituals do. Smiles preloaded, expectations already set. Uncle Franklin stood first, holding a long rectangular box like a presentation piece. "This one's for Avery," he announced, voice carrying. He opened it to reveal a polished wooden plaque, her name engraved beneath her new title in bold serif letters, Chief Executive Officer. Applause followed immediately. Someone took photos. Avery accepted it with a gracious nod, already deciding where it would hang. When my turn came, my mother handed me a small paper bag, lightweight, practical. Inside were a budgeting planner, color-coded tabs neatly aligned, and a stack of discount coupons, groceries, public transit, a local gym. Useful, if you believe the story they told about my life. "Everyone needs structure," Elaine said gently, "especially now." Paige leaned over a moment later, placing a thin folder in front of me. "I printed these for you," she said. "Entry-level positions, receptionist, records clerk. It's good to start somewhere." I thanked her. The words came easily. Gratitude is a language you learn young, when refusal isn't an option. Then Avery cleared her throat. "I've been thinking," she said, smiling as if this were spontaneous. "Once I'm settled, I'll need an assistant. Someone I can trust." She glanced at me, measuring. "I could bring you on. 30,000 a year. Benefits, of course. It might give you direction." The room leaned in. "That's incredibly generous," someone said. "So kind," another added. Ethan nodded approvingly. "Purpose matters," he said, eyes lingering on me a second too long. "People drift without it." I felt the weight of their relief. The problem solved, the embarrassment contained. My life reduced to a manageable line item under Avery's success. They spoke about me as if I weren't there. She'd finally have stability. She needs supervision. It's a chance she doesn't deserve, really. I watched my mother's shoulders relax. This was the outcome she wanted. Control disguised as care. "Does anyone," I asked calmly, "want to know what I actually want?" The question landed softly and vanished. Elaine waved it away without looking at me. "This isn't about wants, Lena. It's about realism." Avery smiled, patient now, victorious. "You don't have to decide tonight," she said, "but I think we all know this is the best option." I nodded again. I always nodded. What they didn't see was how carefully they were documenting themselves. Every offer, every implication, every reduction of my autonomy into a favor. It all went into the same mental file as the whispers, the intervention, the assumptions. Paper insurance isn't just documents. It's behavior, pattern, proof. Ethan leaned closer as the conversation moved on, his voice low. "You should take it," he said. "People like us don't get many chances." People like us. I met his eyes briefly, then looked away. Around me, the family began discussing my future in timelines and contingencies. 6 months, a year, what I'd wear, where I'd live. They spoke in the third person, efficient and confident. I sat still, planner unopened, coupons untouched. This wasn't generosity, it was ownership, and as the night edged closer to its inevitable conclusion, I understood something with absolute clarity. They weren't trying to save me. They were trying to put me back where they thought I belonged, small enough to be managed, quiet enough to be erased. I let them finish, because once people show you how far they're willing to go to diminish you, the decision to leave becomes effortless. And I was already gone. Avery waited until dessert was served. That was always her timing, after sugar, when people were relaxed and receptive. She stood with Ethan beside her, one hand resting lightly against her stomach, the other steadying a glass she didn't drink from. "We have some news," she said. The room leaned forward. "I'm pregnant." Gasps. Applause. My mother covered her mouth. My grandmother's eyes filled instantly. Someone reached for Avery's hand. Someone else already started talking about nurseries and names. Ethan smiled broadly. "And we've decided," he added, "that our child will inherit the family legacy." Legacy. Singular. Settled. Avery's gaze flicked to me for a fraction of a second. "We'll need help," she said smoothly. "Support. It takes a village." She smiled again. "Lena, you could help with childcare. It would be a real contribution." The room hummed with approval. This, apparently, was the most useful future they could imagine for me. Before I could answer, my uncle leaned in with his phone. "Have you all seen this?" he said. "Avery's about to close a massive deal." Heads turned. Screens lit up. "Orion Nexus Group," he read aloud, impressed. "Private tech firm. Valuation $1.2 billion. There were whistles this time. Real ones. "That's huge," someone said. "They don't partner with just anyone," another added. "Their vetting process is brutal." Avery nodded, enjoying the shift. "They reached out," she said. "Apparently they were impressed by our numbers. Reputation matters." The room filled with speculation, how the introduction happened, what the contract might mean, what it would do for her career. My father sat taller. My mother's smile returned, brighter now. "They're known for sustainability," my aunt said, reading from her screen. "Ethical growth, long-term investment in people." "And the founder," my cousin added. "Totally anonymous. No interviews, no photos. Whoever they are, brilliant." I listened as they praised the operating principles I had written myself, the mentorship programs I had funded quietly, the charitable arm that paid tuition for students who looked like I used to. They admired the architecture without recognizing the architect. Avery continued, voice confident now. "It's the biggest contract we've ever signed. Honestly, it validates everything I've worked for." They nodded. They believed her. No one asked how a company with Orion standards would select a partner. No one questioned the speed. No one noticed the contradictions in her story. They were too busy celebrating proximity to power. I sat there, silent, as my life's work was discussed as a rumor, as my values were applauded in someone else's name. This was the moment I understood how completely they had erased me. They could stand in front of the source and still not see it. Avery raised her glass. "To growth," she said. "To family. To the future." Glasses clinked. I didn't lift mine. Because while they were praising Orion Nexus, I was remembering the clause Avery hadn't read yet. The compliance appendix she'd skimmed. The contingency triggers that activated automatically, no drama, no warnings. Paper insurance doesn't announce itself. It waits. And as the room glowed with celebration, I realized the irony was almost elegant. They were honoring my philosophy, my standards, my restraint, without knowing that every word of praise was being recorded, time-stamped, and archived. Not as admiration, as context. And context, when paired with evidence, has a way of changing everything. Avery checked her phone, scrolling with the casual authority she'd been wearing all night. "The signing's tomorrow morning," she said. "Christmas Day, 8 a.m. People groaned softly, then nodded. Important things didn't wait. "Where?" someone asked. 415 Cedar Lane, she replied. "One of Orion Nexus's satellite offices." The room reacted with interest. I felt something else, an internal click, precise and quiet. 415 Cedar Lane. I kept my face neutral, my posture unchanged, but my mind had already moved ahead, laying out the floor plan I knew by heart. The narrow entrance, the mismatched bookshelves, the coffee machine that sputtered before warming up, the small brass plaque by the door that said, "Community Bookshop," and nothing else. It was the bookstore, the one I worked at, the one Orion Nexus owned outright. "That's interesting," my aunt said. "A tech firm using such a modest space." "Non-traditional innovation hubs," my uncle offered. "Very forward-thinking." Avery nodded, pleased. Exactly. They believe creativity works better outside corporate glass boxes. She turned to me then, as if the idea had just occurred to her. "Lena, you could open early tomorrow. We can wait there before the meeting." "Not if I could." "You could." Everyone looked at me, expectant, assumptive. "Sure," I said, "if that helps." Ethan frowned slightly, still on his phone. "That building's registered as a bookstore," he said. "And a community center?" "Flexible use," Avery replied smoothly. "They do that." He nodded, but his confusion didn't fully disappear. I stayed quiet. They discussed logistics, parking, timing, coffee. Who would come? Who would wait outside? They talked around me, through me, using me as a convenience without ever seeing me as a variable. I thought about the absurdity of it, about how many times I'd unlocked that door alone, before dawn, about the security system I'd installed myself, about the private elevator behind the stockroom wall that none of them knew existed. I was about to lead my entire family to a meeting with me, and they still believed I shelved books. Avery smiled at me, satisfied. "See? Everything's lining up." Yes, I thought, it is. As the evening wound down, coats were collected, goodbyes rehearsed, plans set. My mother reminded me to be punctual. My father told me not to embarrass them. I nodded to both. Outside, snow had started falling again, thin, deliberate, the kind that erased footprints quickly. On the drive back to my apartment, I didn't turn on the radio. I let the quiet settle. Tomorrow had shape now. Weight. Cedar Lane wasn't just an address. It was a convergence point, a place where their assumptions would collide with architecture, contracts, and names on paper. I parked, sat for a moment, then checked my phone. No missed calls, no alerts. Everything exactly on schedule. Paper insurance doesn't rush. It waits for people to walk themselves into the frame. And tomorrow morning, at a bookstore they thought they understood, I would unlock the door, not as their failure, not as their assistant, but as the person they had been praising all night without recognizing. The irony didn't make me smile. It just made me very calm. Christmas morning arrived clean and cold. My family showed up dressed for importance. Tailored coats, polished shoes, notebooks tucked under arms like credentials. Avery wore confidence the way some people wear perfume, intentionally and too much. Ethan checked his watch twice in the first minute. I unlocked the bookstore at 7:42 a.m. Charming, my aunt said, scanning the shelves. Very humble. They followed me past the front displays, past the children's section, toward the back where history books leaned under their own weight. I stopped at a shelf labeled Industrial Revolutions and reached behind the spines. There was a pause. A click. The shelf shifted. A glass door slid open soundlessly, revealing a corridor washed in soft white light. At the end of it, steel, glass, quiet motion, an executive operations floor unfolded like a held breath finally released. No one spoke. Ethan was the first to step forward. "What is this?" "A workspace," I said. "Please, this way." They walked slowly now, carefully, as if the floor might reject them. Screens lit automatically as we entered. Global markets, live feeds, compliance dashboards. The Orion Nexus emblem glowed subtly on the far wall. Avery stopped moving. "This isn't," she began. I took the chair at the head of the table. The room adjusted to me, lights recalibrated, displays aligned. The system recognized its authority. I rested my hands on the table, looked up, and met their faces. Confusion, disbelief, something breaking underneath. "I'm the founder," I said, "and the CEO of Orion Nexus Group." Silence collapsed inward. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. My father stared at the floor, as if numbers might rearrange themselves into denial. My grandmother sat down slowly, her breath shallow. Avery laughed once. It sounded wrong. "That's not funny." I didn't respond. I tapped the table and a file opened. Incorporation documents, trust structures, valuation summaries. My name appeared where none of theirs did. "Current personal net worth," I said calmly, $1.4 billion. No one interrupted. "This building," I continued, "is owned by Orion Nexus. The bookstore operates as a community front and early-stage innovation space. The contract you're here to sign," I glanced at Avery, "hasn't been approved." Ethan's color drained. "But we were told—" "You were told what you needed to hear," I said, "by people who didn't understand our compliance triggers." Avery stepped forward. "You used us." "No," I said. "I observed you." I let the screen change. Emails, recordings, meeting notes, dates, patterns. "You misrepresented performance metrics," I said. "You claimed credit for initiatives you didn't lead. You spoke publicly on behalf of a partner you didn't understand." I looked at her then. Really looked. "And you built a future that assumed I would stay invisible." My mother whispered my name. I didn't turn. "This meeting," I said, "is over." Security doors unlocked behind me. Quiet, efficient, final. I stood. The chair slid back without a sound. "There will be audits," I added, "and distance. No reconciliation. No follow-ups." They didn't follow me as I walked out. They couldn't. I exited through the bookstore, past the shelves, past the door that returned to ordinary space. Snow had started again, light, deliberate. I locked the door, and for the first time I felt nothing pulling me back. Avery found her voice first. "You deceived us," she said, the words sharp with accusation. "You let us believe—" "I didn't let you believe anything," I replied. My tone stayed even. "I just didn't correct your assumptions." The distinction mattered. I watched it miss her completely. "I wanted to know," I continued, "how you treat someone you think has no money, no leverage, no relevance. I needed to see it without interference." My father shook his head slowly, as if denial were a physical process. "That's manipulation." "No," I said. "That's observation." Ethan was scrolling frantically on his phone now, his earlier confidence gone. He stopped, frowned, then looked up at me with something close to panic. "There are articles," he said, "about you." He turned the screen toward Avery. "Keynote speaker, Zurich, Singapore, San Francisco." Avery stared at the photos, me on stages she'd never been invited to, behind podiums with logos she recognized but had never touched. "That's not possible," she whispered. "I don't use my family name professionally," I said, "for obvious reasons." I paused, then added, "I also reviewed your company's partnership file personally, for 6 weeks. Her head snapped up. "You weren't on the review committee." "I am the committee," I said. "When something involves culture and ethics, it comes to me." I let that settle. "I watched how you spoke about people you considered beneath you," I continued. "How you reduced my life to a problem to be managed. How you offered control instead of respect." My phone vibrated once on the table. Avery's assistant's name lit up the screen. Hers, not mine. I answered anyway and put it on speaker. "We just received confirmation," the voice said, tight and professional. "Orion Nexus has declined the partnership, citing concerns about leadership integrity and treatment of personnel." The room seemed to tilt. Avery dropped into the nearest chair as if her legs had been removed. "That deal was everything," she said faintly. "It was supposed to secure—" Her voice broke off. The rest of the sentence wasn't necessary. This was the moment her illusion finally failed her. The belief that success insulated her from scrutiny, that proximity to power was the same as understanding it. I looked at her, not with satisfaction, not with anger, just clarity. "Your arrogance didn't ruin you," I said. "Your certainty did." No one argued. No one defended her. There was nothing left to prop up the story they'd built. Ethan stood, pacing once, then stopped. "This can't be reversed?" he asked. I shook my head. "No." Paper insurance works that way. Once activated, it doesn't negotiate. Avery covered her face with both hands. The diamond on her finger caught the light, then dulled as she moved. I noticed the detail and felt nothing. This wasn't revenge. It was consequence. I gathered my coat, my bag. The broken zipper was still there, honest and unchanged. "I needed the truth," I said, more to the room than to her. "You gave it freely." No one stopped me as I walked out. No one followed. Behind me, I could hear the quiet, no longer curated, no longer controlled. Just the sound of a story ending the moment it could no longer be defended. And I didn't look back. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "In the past," I said, standing near the door while the room still felt rearranged by what had happened, "every time I spoke about something I was building, you dismissed it. You called it unrealistic, a phase, a coping fantasy." No one interrupted, not even Avery. "I learned very early," I continued, "that my truth made you uncomfortable, so I stopped offering it." I looked at my parents, at the way my mother's hands folded and unfolded in her lap, searching for something to hold. At my father's eyes, finally lowered, not in anger, but in recognition. "Success," I said, "isn't a title. It isn't a salary, and it definitely isn't a number you repeat to silence someone else. It's how you treat people when you think they have nothing to offer you." That landed differently. Slower. My grandmother Margaret was the first to move. She stood with effort, age suddenly visible in her shoulders. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice shook, but it didn't retreat. "I helped make you small because it was easier than questioning what we rewarded." I nodded once. I didn't reach for her. The apology was hers to own. I'm not here to rebuild this, I said. I'm here to redefine it. I drew a line then, not on paper, not with drama, but with language that left no room for interpretation. If we are to have any relationship going forward, I said, it will be based on respect for who I am, not what I own, not what you can gain, not how well I perform for the room. No bargaining followed, no promises, just silence, the kind that arrives when people understand the rules have changed. For the first time, I added, I get to choose who stays. That was the truth that finally settled the room. No reconciliation speeches followed, no group hug, just a quiet recalibration, visible in posture, in breath, in the way eyes no longer searched for hierarchy. I felt lighter, not triumphant, not vindicated. Free, because the heaviest thing I'd been carrying wasn't secrecy or patience or restraint. It was permission, and I no longer needed it. I stepped outside into the cold, my breath visible for a moment before disappearing. Snow had stopped. The world looked clean, not because it had been forgiven, but because it had been clarified. Some doors close loudly, others don't need to make a sound. Have you ever had to draw a line with the people who were supposed to love you, only to realize they respected you after they saw success, not before? What would you do if your family showed you who they really are when power and money enter the room? Share your story in the comments. If Lena's journey resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about family, self-worth, and the quiet strength it takes to choose yourself.